Like the Shah of Iran, Yamani believed the oil prices the West was paying were unreasonably low. At a conference in Tehran, hosted by the Shah, the oil companies were brought to the negotiating table and forced to increase the price of oil by 35 cents a barrel.
The oil-producing countries themselves were able to ask for a seat at that table because they, at this time in the early 1970s, were beginning to say, the oil is mine. I can produce it how I want to produce it, develop it the way I want to, and if you don't so agree, you, the oil companies, I'm going to exercise my own control over that.
The Tehran Agreement gave the oil producers, for the first time, the right to join the oil companies in fixing the price of oil.
Their hand became strengthened by the simple realization that oil demand itself was outstripping the potential growth in available supply. This meant the power was shifted to the hands of those who owned the oil and who produced the oil. It was becoming a seller's market.
This shift in the marketplace was an ominous development for Western interests.
The growing and insatiable demand of the Western industrial nations for oil, coming on top of a tightening world oil market, meant that the oil exporters were acquiring a new form of power, a political power, and a political power that could be transformed into something called the oil weapon.
Egypt's president, Anwar Sadat, planned to use the oil weapon against Israel. King Faisal of Saudi Arabia promised his support, and on U.S. television, warned of what might happen.
We do not wish to place any restrictions on our oil exports to the United States, but as I mentioned, America's complete support of Zionism against the Arabs makes it extremely difficult for us to continue to supply the United States petroleum needs, or even to maintain our friendship with the United States.
Washington ignored the omens.
Saudi Arabia had tried to warn the United States throughout the spring and summer of 1973 that if war came, and if the United States helped Israel to a great extent, there would be a violent reaction in the Arab world, and that oil would be used as a weapon in this war. The American government chose not to believe those warnings.
In October 1973, on the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur, Egyptian forces stormed across the Suez Canal. Syrian forces attacked in the north. Caught by surprise, the Israelis reeled back. In Vienna, OPEC countries were preparing to meet the Western oil companies and force prices up again. Delegates were still arriving on the very day that the Arab-Israeli war broke out. Two wars were being waged, one on the battlefields in the Middle East and one in the corridors of the Intercontinental Hotel. Both were to shake the world.
October 73 is the time when OPEC alone decided on the price of oil without the oil companies.
2s and 3s would get together in somebody's suite, like Yamani's suite.
We knew what was the price of products and the price of crude oil, and we wanted to have our share as fairly as it is possible.
For us as oil men, it was the whole question of the future of Western dependency on Middle Eastern oil that was at stake.
We knew that the oil companies were going to put a stiff resistance.
We were talking about increases of 35, 40 cents a barrel.
So we asked for an increase in our prices up to $6 per barrel.
felt that this is an opportunity to wrestle from the hand of the oil companies the ability to sit with us and discuss the prices.
Nervous Arab delegates kept tuning their radios to hear the latest reports from the battlefront. For them, the news was good. Overwhelmed and fearing defeat, Israel begged President Nixon for more weapons.
The United States wanted to see Israel resupplied, but it still wanted to keep its hand hidden. Henry Kissinger told me to persuade the Israelis to unload the planes at night, and we would only bring in American airlift under the cover of darkness. The airlift was launched somewhat later than we had hoped, and instead of coming down under the cover of darkness, the first U.S. planes began to drop down into Israel in bright daylight on Sunday morning under television cameras. It was a little hard under those circumstances to keep the American hand hidden.
The tide of battle turned in Israel's favor. As talks broke down in Vienna, the OPEC delegates flew to Kuwait City. They were barely off the plane when they took a momentous decision.
We came to Kuwait, the whole OPEC came to Kuwait to discuss what we can agree on in terms of OPEC. We met the first night and we decided on two things. First, a substantial increase in price. The next day we met as Arab oil producers to decide what we could do to support the Arab side in the conflict.
In the Kuwait Sheraton, Arab exporters agreed to carry out King Faisal's threat and unsheath the oil weapon.
The battle was going so much against the Arab side, and during the latter part of that war, it was inevitable that we would use whatever at our disposal to bring to the world attention the need to address and resolve this Arab-Israeli problem. And that's when we decided to cut back on production.
The Arab oil embargo caused panic and chaos throughout the West.
Well, I live down below here. I went to 96th Street, and boy, there's a line about a mile long. So I says, I'll never get to Monroe.
In America, gasoline prices leapt by 40%.
I understand only giving $4 worth, and that's not going to give me much driving.
Gas lines stretched for blocks.
For the Americans, the long lines at the gasoline stations, the sense of an imperial power being challenged by these people on the hinterland of the world. And suddenly people realize that their very lives and prosperity and conveniences depend on outsiders.
The embargo produced a great shock in the industrial world. We'd had a period of sustained growth since World War II. This was the most serious blow to the world economy at one specific moment that we had seen.
Though all but paralyzed by the Watergate scandal, the Nixon White House was suddenly forced to focus on the Middle East. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger embarked on a seemingly endless round of shuttle diplomacy.
Henry Kissinger used to say that he didn't know anything about any part of the world south of the Pyrenees. He didn't care about the third world. He didn't care about the Arab world. And he even told the Egyptians, he said, folks, I only handle crises when they're hot. Oil was hot, and oil brought him to the region. That's why he went. That's what the entire shuttle diplomacy was about, a way of ending the oil embargo.